Why is the whole country on a reopening schedule that seems like it was drafted in a seniors' home in Montreal or Toronto, a virus hotspot? Why haven't other provinces just said, we're done? Joining us now via Skype from Edmonton is our friend Lorne Gunter, who made this very point in Post Media. His article is entitled, "Don't Let Quebec and Ontario Hold Back Other Provinces." Lorne, great to see you again. I'm sad for the deaths in Ontario and Quebec, but I should say even in those provinces, they're very concentrated, often in seniors' homes. We saw a headline in the Toronto Star, 82% of the deaths have been in seniors' homes. Makes me very sad, but it tells me if you're not in the seniors' home, this was really no worse than the flu.
Yeah, the statistics are interesting, and I have been pushing this now for 2 months. Let's look at the stats. Let's look at the stats. Let's look at the stats, because the statistics are where you find the risk factors in all of this. And, you know, early on, maybe I was a little too optimistic because people didn't know, even really smart people didn't always know where this virus was going to go. But as you say, it's largely been confined to seniors' homes, which is horrible. It's awful. And, you know, the pain that you feel when you watch people who cannot say goodbye to their grandparents or their elderly parents, who have to wave through the window, and the last time they're going to get to hold them or talk to them or whatever was months ago, and they didn't know that was going to happen. That is just so heartbreaking to see. So please, when I say this has been confined mostly to seniors' homes, don't get the wrong impression that I think it's trivial as a result of that. It's certainly not, but it informs our strategy for dealing with the infection, or at least it should. And the thing is, you know, we talk here in the introduction about Toronto and Montreal. Toronto and Montreal aren't even close to the same levels of infection. Montreal has many times, 4 times more infection than Toronto does. I mean, Toronto is, of course, the panic capital, the hipster capital of the country. So in Toronto, they're worried about, my plastic bag might choke a squirrel somewhere in Algonquin. My plastic straw could kill a turtle. My SUV is going to melt the ice cap. This infection is going to destroy society. Calm down. Look at the statistics. And when you look at the statistics, Montreal was very much better than New York City. And Toronto is very much better than Montreal. So it is many times better than New York City ever was. But you don't get that out of most of the coverage. The coverage is, it's happening there, it's coming here. My God, we have to get ready for it.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason you will see people go to the grocery store, not just with a mask on, but with gloves as well. And they jump out of the way when you push your cart anywhere close to them, and they cringe by the soup cans. It's an overreaction. Did we know that going in? No. And do I fault public health officials for doing what they did in March? No, I don't. I wish they had done it now. In hindsight, I didn't know this in January. I wish in January they'd have done some of these things much, much earlier, like shut off foreign travel from hotspots and really isolate people who were suspected of having the infection. I think that would have reduced the widespread or the outbreak a great deal in Canada. So, yes, are there things we can do better and faster? Yes, of course there are. But I don't fault people for not knowing that. Even Theresa Tam and other public health officials, who would have guessed this would come here like this? Right.
And the thing is, we saw such terrible imagery coming out of China, and like the Soviet Union in Chernobyl, we didn't know, well, is it 100 times worse, or is it just their reaction that's 100 times worse? So there was that added level of mystery and malice. But I think we're through that now. I just saw today a statistic that showed 96% of the mortalities in Italy were accompanied by an underlying, as they say, a comorbidity.
And in fact, 3/4 of them were accompanied by 3 or more underlying conditions. So you had people who were obese, smokers, who are diabetic, and over 80. Well, okay, I still feel really, really badly. I mean, some of those pictures of Italian churches where the priests were doing mass blessings of caskets because there had been so many people die in a small village within a couple of days. That's really heart-wrenching. I'm not trying to diminish that in any way, but it does give you an idea of whether or not you want to shut down the entire economy if nobody under 40 is getting really sick and almost no one under 70 is dying.
Yeah.
So that's why the statistics are so important. I'll give you another statistic. In Ontario, where, of course, people are panicked again because the daily infection rates went up slightly. There are two reasons that I can see for that. One is Ontario was very slow to start mass testing. That's a big mistake. That can't happen again. But they are testing now at a much more ferocious rate. And so you're going to catch more positives when you do more testing. That's number one. Number two is, of course, Ontario has opened up its economy a bit, and that might tend to lead to more infections initially. It did in South Korea, which has handled this very well. They had slightly elevated infection rates after they opened their economy. It did it in Germany, which has handled this very well too. So you have to sort of expect that. But then you look at that, what's the park in Toronto? Trinity Bellwoods, I think it was called, where they had lots of people on the lawn. And media outlets went and took pictures from the lawn level. And when you get down and you shoot through a crowd, it looks far more crowded than it probably really was. What I looked for and could not find was a drone image from the same park, because that's when you can tell whether people are social distancing or not. But Ontario has almost 80% of the people who have had COVID in Ontario are now recovered. The similar figure for Quebec is 30%. So the virus is still very active in Quebec, and it's not nearly as active in Ontario. So the fact that the CBC panics or the Toronto Star panics, they still, my goodness, it's going to kill us still. It means they're not looking at the statistics and trying to put this all in perspective. So not only is it unfair to BC and Alberta and New Brunswick, again, there's one case in New Brunswick that's unresolved. This person's still sick, but they're self-isolating at home. How much risk are you at if you go out in public in New Brunswick? Not much. So why shouldn't you be able to go out in New Brunswick? And they have opened up their economy even more than any other province. So this is the reason why I wrote a piece on the weekend that said we can't allow the panic that's in Ontario and the real infection that still exists in Quebec to hold back the rest of the country. Because the rest of the country, the city of Edmonton with 1 million people has fewer than 50 active cases. They are all self-isolated or an institution. So if I go to the grocery store, how much risk am I at of contracting COVID-19? Very, very little, if any at all. So, this is the kind of sense when the Prime Minister says again and again and again that he's listening to the experts, he's listening to the scientists. If he is still thinking the whole country should be locked down, then he's not listening to the experts and he's not listening to the science. He's not looking at the stats in the way he should be looking at them.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.